Minna, ole hyvä.
Hello everyone. Now I'm echoing. Do we solve this problem? Everyone having their microphones muted. Let's try now. Dear friends around the Baltic Sea, you are most warmly welcome to the Baltic Sea Region Forum. As we have been getting used to organizing and participating webinars during the last year or so, I'm sure we are all even more looking forward to leaving this peculiar time of the pandemic behind us. Today, we are still meeting online, and I am sure we are going to have an inspirational seminar regarding the current affairs and the future of the Baltic Sea region. For we have a very influential set of highly distinguished and experienced speakers gathered today. I want to welcome you all and thank you in advance for your time and your effort to prepare for this forum. Welcome. Today we are discussing about geopolitics and security in and around the Baltic Sea region. Even this week, we have seen that security is fragile, even at the surroundings of our home region, one of the most peaceful and stable areas in the world at the moment. It seems that anything can happen, and one must be prepared for even the most unlikely scenarios. I'm sure that today we will have many wise insights regarding this. As mayor, I obviously look at the issue from a local perspective. I look at cities, pragmatic communities with direct contact and responsibility to the citizens. Today, the role of cities in building networks and cross-border partnerships is growing rapidly. I could call this a kind of bottom-up internationalization that breathes from the citizens and brings together actors from all levels, municipalities, regions, states, as well as researchers, policymakers, NGOs, and other stakeholders. City collaboration has a security side to it. Working together at the local level promotes, for instance, business opportunities, cultural exchange, sharing ideas for development, and above all, strengthens the mutual understanding of one another's position and way of thinking. Cities and citizens working together over national borders is effective diplomacy and a pragmatic way to promote well-being and achieving our mutual goals. Dear friends, cities will not take the place of nation states as key actors in security and diplomacy. But as I have said many times before, the role of citizens and their support will grow stronger by the day. Without the support from the citizens, we will not succeed. Empowerment and inspiration of the people is done closely to citizens by offering accountability and ways of understanding policies. This is why partnerships are so important in all aspects. Dear friends, with these words, I want to again welcome you all to this webinar. I wish you a successful forum and inspiring discussions. And now we are going to hear next the keynote speech by the Latvian minister. And this will be the video regard, so we can put this one going on. Thank you very much. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It's my great pleasure to give a keynote speech, a brief speech for your conference, and thank you also to Centrum Balticum, which invited me to give this presentation. And I think that your discussion is very timely for the current global challenges. We really live in turbulent times, and these turbulent times are not passing also our Baltic Sea region. What are those turbulences? Who are creating them? I would say there are a number of things which are concerning. First, we very much embrace that technological change and technological revolution, what is happening around. If there would not be such technologies, such conference also at this moment probably would not be possible. But at the same time, the new technologies are also giving a big challenge to a number of facets within our societies, including also security and defense. Artificial intelligence, cyber attacks, fake news, our fading inability to figure out what is right and what is wrong, to figure out what is fake and what is truth, to really be connected, not to be afraid that we are losing our privacy. There are challenges from private companies, there are challenges from different organizations, and of course, there are challenges from the state actors. Looking from the Baltic Sea perspective, we are the countries which are among the most developed countries, I would say, in the world. Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries have been always on the forefront of different technological innovations. We in the Baltics always have been on the forefront with reform process, with speedy development and vitality. When I'm speaking today from Latvian capital Riga, I can proudly say that we are among the countries with fastest internet connection, with cheapest internet connection for people. Our military has established already this year a base where 5G is available, first time in Europe, in European continent, where we are connecting our military communication systems with different expertise of private companies where they can make test grounds and research. But at the same time, we also know that a lot of challenges are coming from this technology existence. We also live in a symmetric geopolitical challenging world. Nearby are such countries as Russia and Belarus. Last year we experienced really a turmoil in Belarus. It did not finish yet. We have a border with this country. Russia is a country with, I would say, very challenging nature, ready to challenge existing world order, trying to recover its worldly might. Unfortunately, it seems that it's more and more do so on the expense of its neighbors and other countries. Also, European Union, even if a very important organization, an example for the whole world how countries can cooperate, at this moment is not in its best shape. United Kingdom has left European Union. We have different types of challenges within and outside European Union. Just mention a few of them. These are questions of common security or foreign policy. These are questions about safeguarding our borders. These are questions about overcoming migration crisis. These are challenges. How do we deal in our transatlantic relationship with our classical and traditional allies like United States and Canada? At the same time, how do we counter the increasing Chinese influence which is expanding also in European continent? And we must understand that here in the northern region, in the Baltic Sea region, in many ways we are a border countries. We are bordering authoritarian regime in Russia. We are the border of EU. We are the border of NATO. If European Union is becoming weaker, then also we as a bordering countries are experiencing more pressure from all these challenges which are happening. While I speak, we also know that there have been the first talks between the new administration of United States and Kremlin. We are also surprised, I'm personally surprised, for instance, also about changes in policies regarding Nord Stream 2, which is a real challenge for the Eastern European countries like Ukraine, but this is also a challenge for NATO allies and EU allies, because differently from some business circles in Central Europe, Nord Stream 2 is not serving interests of European Union. It's not serving our common interest. Maybe it is serving to interests of some business circles, but it's not serving a common interest. So the energy policy also is one of the very, very important aspects what current global challenges are giving to us. What could be the answers? Well, I think on the large scale, one of the answers is that we have to keep European Union and NATO vigilant, because our diplomatic efforts, our value policies, always should be also supported by our economic might and also our military might. Because country which is only economically strong is nothing if it is facing challenge from authoritarian countries, growing authoritarian countries, and if it doesn't have any kind of military possibilities to defend itself. We in the Baltics, this experienced already in last century during the 1939 when Finland was engaged in the winter war and where we were thinking we will be smarter and we will try to avoid the humanitarian casualties. We were among the bigger losers than Finns. I think in this case we should really take an example from Finland in 1939 and tell again we will never allow such things to repeat on our soil. Another thing is, of course, that we have to keep transatlantic alliance strong, because US presence is very important in European continent and also in the Baltic Sea region. We are increasingly asking and trying to persuade United States to understand how important the Baltic Sea region is for whole Western world. I believe that we in the Baltics, we in Latvia, we in Riga, we are not the only ones which are concerned about this. I think that it's also very important to stress that here in the Baltic Sea region, even if not all member countries are members, or not all countries are members of NATO, there is still necessity for mutual military cooperation, mutual defense cooperation, maritime defense cooperation, air surveillance, and etc. And this cooperation should be based on common defense interests. We must be able, capable, and willing to help each other if the turbulent times will increase their turbulence in Baltic Sea region. So we are expecting a much closer and better cooperation also as far as security between the Baltic states on the one side, Poland on the one side, and such countries as Finland and Sweden from another side. And I'm also, while mentioning Sweden and Finland, I'm also thinking about, of course, Norway, Denmark, and also Iceland. Any defense, any security, first of all, depend on the resilience and willingness to stand for their values, for their country, of its own citizens. In this regard, we in Latvia have been making a huge progress. We are not only among the exemplary countries within NATO. Our military budget at this moment from our GDP is about 2.35%. We hope it will remain. We hope also that our neighboring countries, Estonia and Lithuania, will continue to keep their military budgets without any kind of decrease. But among that, we have been also engaged in improving civilian resilience. In Latvia, we are introducing already for a number of years so-called comprehensive defense system, which means that all other facets, administrative facets, ministries, private industries, should learn and be capable also to act in times of crisis, including, unfortunately, also the war times. We are the country which have been introducing also a defense, security, crisis, and military education in our schools, and starting from 2024, for 2 years in 10th and 11th grade, our pupils will be learning, among others also, how to act in crisis, how to help each other, how to be a patriotic citizen, and how to defend a country in a dire straits. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take too much time from your relevant participation time in this conference, but I really believe in the cooperation of the Baltic Sea region. I believe in the example of the Baltic Sea cooperation for the rest of the world, because we are not the rest. We actually are the best in Europe if we work together here in the north. Good luck and have a nice and in-depth discussions in this wonderful event.
Thank you very much. Excellent speech, and I have to say that I really liked when the artist Babrix was emphasizing the importance of Baltic Sea region for the whole world, and like he concluded, we can achieve great things if we are working together. And that is exactly what we are going to do this afternoon. Well, at least Finnish time this afternoon today. So warm welcome on my behalf as well. My name is Jarno Limnell. I'm the professor of practice in cybersecurity here in Aalto University and also adjunct professor in 3 other universities. And physically, I am in beautiful city of Espoo in Otaniemi at the moment. So warm welcome to this seminar or Baltic Sea Region Forum. And I personally have to say in the beginning that I really like the title of this forum, Turbulent World Order and the Baltic Sea Region. And that's what we are going to talk about next a little bit less than 2 hours exactly. So when I'm thinking about the new normal in security, in what kind of security environment we are living on daily basis, I would emphasize that there are 3 key features what we have to take into consideration. First of all, the speed of change. How fast nowadays things are changing, both in the physical world, but then of course in the digital world as well. As we all know, we humans, we are developing technology faster and in a more radical way at the moment than we have never done before. And that will have for sure security consequences as well. So in a way, like it has been said, the new reality is like unpredictable instability in a positive way as well. I think the second key point here when we are talking about the new normal is the complexity. As my opinion, I think this complexity where we are living in the world where more or less everything affects to everything means the biggest challenge for experts trying to understand this complex world and these different interactions when we are talking about different things and phenomena. And the third point in our new security reality is blurring dichotomies. I think it's even harder today to separate exactly when we are having a wartime or peacetime. What is digital, what is physical? Who is on our side, who is on their side, and so on and so on. So this creates like the context when we are talking about the security challenges as well as solutions in the Baltic Sea area in 2021. And we will go straight to the first panel discussion, and the title is Geopolitics has returned. That's a claim. What does it mean for the Baltic Sea region? Question mark. So very big, important question here. We have actually 3 panelists, and we will go through in a way that first, each panelist, they have approximately 5 minutes to introduce the most important aspects of their perspective to answer this question. Geopolitics has returned. What does it mean for the Baltic Sea region? And good morning or good afternoon, Keir Giles, Senior Consulting Fellow, Chatham House, UK. How are you doing?
Hello again, Jarno. Very well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
So what would you say in short first? Has geopolitics returned?
In short, yes, 5 minutes to cover big global issues like this is a challenge, but Yes, geopolitics is back, or great power competition, to use the current phrase. But if we're lucky, then the Baltic Sea region will be one of the areas of the world that is least affected by those disruptive factors. And that's because it is so far ahead of the curve. Now, you might have seen in the presentation that opened this seminar, the quote from Professor Kariluoto explaining how 5 years ago, yes, we were already looking at the issues which are now taking the rest of Europe by surprise. There are a lot of challenges, but they are ones to which the Baltic Sea region is already alert and alive, for one very simple reason, that in the neighborhood you have what here in the UK we would call the neighbors from hell. So you've already started to deal with a lot of the problems that the rest of the world is actually just starting to realize. Now, Minna said the situation is fragile, but let me tell you, seen from outside, the Baltic Sea region's security position seems better now than it has been for a very long time. Certainly in terms of hard security and military issues, arguably also in terms of soft challenges, the ones on the other side of that blurred line that Jarno, you just talked about, between war and peace. Because even just 5 years ago, there was a dangerous imbalance. Russia was already more than a decade into its intensive program of rearming and modernizing its armed forces. And on the other side, much of the rest of the Baltic Sea region was, relatively speaking, a military vacuum. And nature and Russia abhor a vacuum. And weakness, we know from President Putin, because he says it so often, is a temptation to enemies. Now, that temptation has largely been removed because through initiatives like NATO's enhanced forward presence deployment in the Baltic states and Poland, and Sweden's belated moves to actually repair their own long neglected defense capabilities, now those popular scenarios for military adventurism by Russia in the region are already far less realistic. Now, you could argue we still need a lot more work on strengthening resilience against civil contingencies. We might need to force through those collaborative security efforts, that solidarity, addressing that wide range of non-military hostile activity that comes primarily from Russia. Because where NATO deals with military threats or the Joint Expeditionary Force, if you're not a NATO member, the EU is supposed to be acting as its counterpart and complementing for soft security issues. But we see very little activity or progress in this regard. And as you just heard from Minister Pabriks, in some cases the EU can be distinctly unhelpful. But in terms of how to counter these threats that some people call hybrid threats, we've argued for a long time that a counter-hybrid strategy is basically indistinguishable from good governance. And again, as you just heard from Minister Pabriks, this region, the Baltic Sea region, is an island of good governance within the EU, let alone in the rest of the world. And we still hold up total defense systems like that of Finland and the one that Sweden is trying to resurrect, or Latvia's comprehensive defense, as case studies for the rest of Europe for how to do it right. There's still risk, of course, primarily from Russia, and now we've also seen how Belarus can throw in wild cards at any moment. All of the military and non-military threats, like the irresponsible brinkmanship with aircraft, the electronic warfare capabilities being tested against the region, the soft challenges like migrant dumping and more, will continue to form part of that inescapable background noise of living next to Russia. But we shouldn't be misled by the claims that the region is dangerous, because all of those security threats, without exception, emanate from Russia and Belarus. Take them out of the equation, there is no problem. That threat that we hear so much about, a military miscalculation leading to uncontrollable escalation and war, including nuclear weapons, we hear it constantly from Russia's propagandists and its messengers and its network of influencers, but it is a ploy which Russia supports through its irresponsible behavior to try to cause others to waver and back down and provide Russia with that freedom of movement that it is looking for in physical space, in moral and legal space, and in cognitive space as well, where people are afraid to defend themselves. We need to recognize that tactic for what it is, and as we've already heard more than once, deal with it through solidarity and resolve. And the result of that will be the Baltic Sea region remaining, as it is now, as safe as it has been for many decades. That's it from me, Arno.
Excellent. So you solved almost all the challenges in less than 5 minutes. Well done. I knew that I could count on you. But I think we are having still a few challenges, and especially when we are looking for the answers behind the Atlantic Ocean. good morning, or is it morning, William, for you?
It is very early in the morning, but I'm very happy to be here.
But you look fresh. You look very fresh.
Thank you very much.
So, warm welcome, William E. POMERANZ, Deputy Director, Kinnan Institute, USA. What would you say in your 5 minutes?
Well, it's very interesting about the United States. We've obviously had a change of leadership, and when President Biden was sworn in, I think his priority was domestic issues. Obviously, the pandemic, but he's also trying to get infrastructure bills passed and economic stimulus and so forth. But the United States can't isolate themselves from global affairs. I think we've learned over the past week that stuff happens. And when stuff happens, the United States has to respond and cannot sit on the sidelines. For the Baltic and the Northern Europe security issues, I think President Biden has issued strong support for NATO and its commitments. And the big question, though, which was raised by the previous speaker, is what to do about Russia. This is a moving target. Obviously, we've had some very important developments over the past few weeks, including what was mentioned in the keynote address, the decision not to sanction the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I think there are many reasons why President Biden made this decision, but in essence, I think it was to try to shore up our European alliances, which have been severely frayed over the past administration. Obviously, there is a lot of speculation as to what happens on June 16th, when President Biden and President Putin will sit down and discuss global affairs in Geneva. I think we're kind of hearkening back to two superpowers, but I don't think there are two superpowers that are meeting in Geneva. I think there is one superpower and a global and regional power that has bigger aspirations. But how that is resolved, whether there are concessions, whether it's just an opening to dialogue, that may be a way to diffuse the situation, and especially to diffuse the increasingly belligerent rhetoric coming from the Russian Federation towards the United States and our allies. The United States has been accused of Russophobia, of interfering in the upcoming parliamentary elections in Russia, of not having, of actually having tried to remove Russia from the UN Security Council. So if indeed some of the rhetoric can be toned down, some form of dialogue can be restored, that will be a positive step. I don't think there is going to be a reset or even a mini reset, because the differences between the United States and Russia are too great at this point to paper over. So I don't think that is going to happen. Indeed, Secretary of State Blinken has talked about the need for stability and predictability in U.S.-Russian relations. I don't know if we're even going to get there as well, but at least there will be a forum to meet, a forum for dialogue, and hopefully the unexpected, which was mentioned earlier, will not turn into a catastrophic confrontation. I think, obviously, that in terms of the future of Baltic security, there is the old suspicions, and rightfully so, among several key EU member states, especially in the Baltics, that will make closer relations between the Baltic region and Russia harder to achieve. Obviously, there is traditional attempts from Finland and from others to restore international trade relations and to increase the trade, increase trade between the two countries. But Russia has not really shown a willingness to increase trade through its import substitution policies, its cybercrime hacks and so forth. And basically, I think Russia is turning inward before it will again turn outward and try to use trade as a means to defuse tensions. So in conclusion, I think we will have to watch the current negotiations and discussions between the United States and Russia, but I do not see a major reset or even a change in relations. I think that the United States and President Biden has shown a willingness to support NATO and to support the Baltic region, and I think that is a key to future development of security in this region. So with that, I'll close.
Thank you very much, William. And I have to say that, especially coming from Finland, that you are saying that you are supporting your allies and friends sounds very good. Good morning, Belgium. Good morning, Annika. How are you doing?
Good morning. Actually, I'm in Stockholm.
In Stockholm?
Since Sweden is my home country and I work from here in my various capacities.
Well, we can say like they say in Eurovision that, hello, Stockholm. So Annika Söder, President, European Institute of Peace, and now in Stockholm, as you mentioned, and you are also OSCE's chair's representative in the South Caucasus. If I may, Annika, ask, when you were listening what Geir and William were saying already, any thoughts on that and on your own thoughts as well?
Well, spontaneously, when they're pointing at the rebuilding of defense capacities in our region, it's very true. It's also very true that our region, including all the 5 Nordic countries and the 3 Baltic countries, is well equipped for various kinds of threats. I feel kind of flattered, but I also think they are very, very right. And that is also, of course, a responsibility. What do we do with this capacity in order to move towards something that is better than the present geopolitical situation we're living in? So if you want me to continue, I could.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I've been a decision and policy maker for many, many years, and now I put my feet on the ground, actually having this mediation task together with the UN and the European Union in Georgia and in the South Caucasus region. And of course, it's a very challenging task. In my capacity for the European Institute of Peace, founded by Sweden, Finland, and Poland some years ago, we're also involved in track 2 activities promoting dialogue in Belarus, actually very difficult, and in Ukraine in some of the other neighboring situations. I believe that there is an obvious threat with this geopolitical situation also globally, and that is, of course, also where the EIP is working. And I wanted to say that in addition to the EU solidarity clause, in addition to the NATO security guarantees provided to the NATO members, it's also important that we engage multilaterally and come back to that. And that is why the Biden administration is also a relief, I believe, for many of us when it comes to pushing for solutions in the United Nations Security Council, in the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, where my assignment rests, and where I would say not least Finland, but also some of the other countries actually built something when we thought that geopolitical rivalry, Cold War, everything was over. And I believe that all these instruments need to be pushed for and enhanced. And in particular for us, the 8 small countries in our region, we need multilateral approaches, obviously on the security side, but also when it comes to soft security and other kinds of cooperation to actually safeguard the entirety of our progress. And we're challenged not only by geopolitical rivalry, but also by the backsliding of democracy and authoritarianism. And I believe there is an important question here, and that is that some actors are willing to take to arms to safeguard or enhance their power, while the present paradigm in our own region with our partners in the West is actually not embracing such a notion. And what does that mean for the balance when we are trying to promote the values that we stand for, that very often are called European values, but are actually the values enshrined in the various international documents that everyone should abide with. So I would like to also say a few words about diplomacy as not only a complementary feature, but also in a way as the first line of defense. And dialogue at all levels is, of course, of key importance. And we must not forget all the instruments that we have in the Baltic Sea region that would actually be sort of boring, daily work, quite pedestrian. But we have the Council of Baltic Sea States involving also Germany and Russia. How could that focus on interests that may be common, even if we have such great difficulties with Russia's policies presently? We have the Arctic Council addressing climate and security concerns that are being exacerbated by the changes that we see in the world, where we also had a successful meeting. Less successful was the Arctic Council when we had the earlier American administration, but I'm quite hopeful that there is room for cooperation. We have the northern dimension related to the European Union, where Finland played a key role in setting this up. We also have the Barents Council, not very much known by many, but also bringing countries, including Russia and the Arctic related countries in our region together to solve problems that are of security concern. So I'm quite sure that with more diplomacy, with more engagement in all these entities, we would also lay a foundation where it will also be clear that we are not against the Russians, but we are very much against the Russian policies. This takes me also to the work that we're doing in the OSCE, confronting many, many difficulties. And let me mention the protracted conflicts where we are working now: Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the new and very difficult situation in Belarus. If we look at the map, we can see how these conflicts, most of them strongly affect the Black Sea, where we see the obvious Russian strategic interests playing out. And how can we, as mediators, try to serve the people very, very negatively affected by the conflict, while the strategic overarching interests are guiding the main actor here? And how does this link to the Caspian Sea, to our own sea, and how does this also bring to the center transport corridors, energy issues, and not only the role of Russia and the Western interest, but also the important role that China plays in this regard. We're all looking towards the meeting in Geneva that was mentioned, and we're looking very much forward to an increased role by the US in the multilateral fora. But there is another aspect to this that I wanted to end with, and that is that when we're working on managing the conflicts, hoping for conflict resolution in the conflicts I mentioned, we hope that the policies that will come out from the new US administration would not only be a residual of US-Russia relations, but also take into account the necessity for the European Union and the countries that I mentioned that are in conflict to actually find a way forward. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Annika. And I have to say that there were many same topics and themes when I was listening every one of you. But hey, we will go forward. I come back to those themes a little bit later. But Geir, what do you think? How do you think that the current political landscape of the United Kingdom could affect the country's geopolitical role in the Baltic Sea region? How you see that?
Well, as you know, later on we'll have the British ambassador in Finland in the second session who can give the official answer to that, which I'm sure is completely accurate and transparent. But looking at it from an unofficial point of view, it should make no difference at all to the UK's commitment to stability and security in the region. Now, it doesn't help, of course, that the UK was part of that like-minded community of nations within the EU that saw a whole range of challenges more or less the same way. Not only external challenges, but also things like fiscal prudence and good governance within the EU. The UK's argument with EU member states was certainly not with any of those in Northern Europe. But at the same time, most of the actual security provision arrangements that were going on were nothing to do with the EU, in part because of that vacuum of competence and vacuum of interest that the EU was displaying towards these challenges. So they were all expressed either in bilateral initiatives or in joining in with mechanisms that were outside the EU, like NATO, like the GEF, like joining with, for example, in Helsinki, the European Centre for Hybrid Threats. Take the European out of it, that's irrelevant. So the UK's commitment will not change in terms of its interest in the region and the way it wants to protect it. The UK's own internal challenges in terms of reducing its own capacity to deliver power, particularly military power, will stunt its ambition, but certainly the will still be there.
Very good. Let's see how the ambassador will answer the same question a little bit later. But excellent points. Thank you very much, Geir. William, you started very well talking about the Biden's administration's emphasis on the foreign policy issues and the supporting the allies. Could you a little bit continue with that when we are talking about the security in the Baltic Sea region? Is there some activities from your country's point of view that we should especially follow in the coming months or coming years concerning about your activities in the Baltic Sea region?
I think we have made very strong commitments to the Baltic region through NATO. And I think as long as NATO is supported and is seen by the Biden administration as important for U.S. security, that all the changes in NATO and the developments to advanced security interests, advanced security defenses in the Baltics will be supported by the United States. We will not have the rather disruptive conversation about how much of the budgets of the Baltic states and the European allies are directed toward defense. And I would just want to re-echo Annika's previous statement that the new Biden administration is a relief for everyone. I will not only say that it's a relief for the Baltic Security Forum and for NATO and the EU, but I think it's a relief for the United States because we will not have as confrontational a policy. Biden is trying to mend the defenses that were torn down by the previous administration. I do want to, again, point to the Nord Stream 2 decision to suggest that Biden will try to accommodate many different voices in his foreign policy and will try to support traditional allies in a way that may cause tension between other nations. But I think the intention of the Biden administration is to go forward with our natural allies and our security commitments. And I think that is a very strong basis for our foreign policy going forward.
Very good. Thank you for your good points, William. Annika, we come back from UK and from United States to Scandinavia and European Union. How do you think the present geopolitical situation will affect the work of the EU and its eastern neighborhood. What would you say?
First, it's no secret that the EU has been struggling with its policies towards Russia for a very, very long time, with a more relaxed approach from some big and southern members of the European Union, and a lot of concerns expressed from the countries in our own region. We had the 5-track policies decided now 4 or 5 years ago. It's still being discussed. I doubt that we will see a strong and clear policy when it comes to Russia. It should also be noted that it's quite clear, talking to think tanks in Moscow, that for Russia, the EU is not a main, I shouldn't use the word partner, but it's not the main actor. Russia prefers to talk to Germany or France or other bigger actors, which of course makes it even more important for us, the EU members in the Baltic Sea region, to make our case and try to influence the EU and see to it that we can come together on a joint policy, even if we will have this asymmetry, and maybe even more so with the UK leaving the European Union. We have more of sort of regional bigger country dominance, when it comes to approaches in Europe. There is the Eastern Neighborhood policy, there is the Eastern Partnership policy. Hopefully there will be a summit this year on how the EU should relate to the 6 countries involved in this, with all the complications coming from the fact that we have a very unstable situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The uncertainty and difficulties in Belarus are of course playing in here as well. And even if we state from the European Union that the Eastern Partnership is not against anyone, it's actually in favor of the 6 countries involved, it is becoming more and more of a difficulty in the relationship between Russia and the EU, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, that strategic Russian interests go against the interests that the EU is trying to promote when it comes to decision, the liberty and freedom to make choices by some of the countries in this group.
Good. Thank you very much, Annika. Hey, my next point is actually to all of you. The same one. You were all mentioning in your opening remarks soft security and that related issues. But of course, when we are talking about security, we have to take into consideration the hard security views as well, meaning the military power and military activities in the Baltic Sea region. What would you say, what kind of role or balance this hard and soft military activities or security activities plays nowadays in the Baltic Sea region? What would you say, Kate?
Yes, Jarno, it's. I think you've hit the nail on the head, particularly when it comes to the kind of conversations that we have in the UK about where exactly to prioritize efforts in terms of protecting countries and societies, because too many people fall into the seductive trap of thinking that you can choose one or the other. And even if you think within that military bracket, whether you're looking at preparation for high-end, high-intensity warfare, or for some of the more modern, up-to-date forms of conflict that they claim that now so many armed forces are pivoting towards, like the low-intensity conflict, like counterinsurgency, like cyber, etc. The problem is, across the board, you can't choose between them because they are all means and methods by which our adversaries can destabilize our societies and challenge our sovereignty for a whole range of different reasons. So yes, there has to be a balance. I would come back to the point that I was suggesting in my opening remarks, that particularly in the Baltic Sea region and in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania especially, that balance is about right. A lot of people look at the size of the NATO commitment in those three countries and think it is so small it cannot possibly make a difference, but that misses the point. It taps into that NATO solidarity. It removes that possibility of targeting an individual one of those states without getting the rest of the alliance involved, which of course is precisely what our adversaries wish to avoid. It also overlooks the point that when you talk about small NATO contingents of NATO troops in each of these countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, you forget that all of the armies that are already there are NATO troops as well. So let's not forget that this is actually only a small increment to the capabilities that are already there in numerical terms, but making a huge difference in terms of geopolitics. So to my mind, that is a success story. And it's one that's also replicated across the board in terms of soft security challenges as well. I think the balance is about right in terms of effort, but as I said before, where we could do more is in more international cooperation to actually spread that best practice for dealing with those soft challenges, because there are some countries that are exceptionally good at it because they recognize that the problem never went away. And there are other challenges, particularly in the west of Europe, where you could spread best practice, that simply are not paying serious attention to the problem.
Very good. What would you say, William?
Well, I agree with Kiers, and the fact that in the Baltic region, they have made the difficult but correct decisions between hard security and soft security. To broaden the conversation a little bit, though, I think that this question of hard and soft security is more relevant in some of the former Soviet republics, notably Ukraine and Georgia, who both have made statements about wanting to join NATO. And the question is whether NATO can accept a member into this military alliance when they are immediately engaged in military conflict in the region. So I think that this becomes a larger question when you look outside the Baltic states, and how one deals with, especially, I'll mention the situation in Ukraine. It's no accident that Secretary of State Blinken made his first trip abroad to Kiev and assured the Ukrainian government that the United States stands behind the territorial integrity of Ukraine. That is a very positive statement and a very positive step, but obviously Ukraine will be concerned as to what transpires in Geneva and to what extent the United States continues to make strong security guarantees for Ukraine, and to what extent, in order to have a more stable relationship between Russia and the United States, does Ukraine kind of go to the back burner. So I do think that there are important questions about hard and soft security, but as the previous speaker said, the situation in the Baltics is fairly stable. The situation in the former Soviet republics, which can also drag in NATO and the United States and our European allies into conflict, are less secure.
Very good points. Thank you, William. What would you say, Annika, especially when we are having around Baltic Sea region different countries who are not NATO members and who are NATO members, and when we are thinking about the security from the European Union's point of view, it's usually thought as a soft security actor. What are your thoughts?
First, I wanted to make a couple of points related to this. First, I would say that with the present military situation in the region, there is of course a concern related to incidents and provocations, and we're all struggling with that, including Finland and Sweden being military non-aligned. And here I believe Finland's approach of having an ongoing dialogue with Russia is a very important safeguard. The other one is, of course, that we establish military contacts and hotlines, even if it's very often sensitive, to actually see to it that the present military situation does not go out of hand or control. Secondly, I wanted to comment on what was said about the situation in Ukraine, because this is exactly what I'm struggling with on a daily basis. In the conflict in Ukraine, in the conflict in Georgia, there is of course a concern in NATO and in the EU to bring them in, since we would then also import conflicts. At the same time, the conflict is being upheld by Russia through proxies, and that would of course then prevent the process towards membership or closer ties with the EU and NATO. And if we watch Cyprus and the problems that the EU imported there, I also believe there is a discussion and some hesitance when it comes to this. And this is of course known by all sides, by Georgia, in Kiev, and also in Moscow. Coming back to being a member of a structure, of an organization, of a multilateral team is of course an important security guarantee, be it soft security or hard security. But I can see so many dilemmas when I look at the conflicts in Eastern Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika, and thank you all for the excellent points. And of course, like Keira said in the beginning, this is a huge topic when we are talking about geopolitics in the Baltic Sea region, and we are supposed to solve almost all the challenges. But what would be at this moment, May 2021, the main message when we are thinking about the security in Baltic Sea region to the key political decision makers around Baltic Sea region at the moment? One key message, what would it be? If we start with you, William.
I think the key message for the Baltic Sea region is Russia's assertion of sovereignty as the main international principle of diplomacy. We've seen that in the Arctic region, where Russia is militarizing and also pursuing economic advantage because of climate change. So I think that the assertion of sovereignty as the main criteria for international affairs is what is a development that has lasted centuries in Russia, but has been reasserted over the last few years. The second point in terms of Russia and engagement with the Baltics and largely with the EU is that I think this is being diminished in the Russian Federation through a variety of ways. I'll just point out that Russia has benefited from being a member of the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights, and decisions in the European Court of Human Rights have been implemented by the Russian Federation. But with Putin's 2020 constitutional amendments, there is a direct movement away from these European values, away from the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights. And so I think that going forward, one must understand that Russia is returning to traditional values of sovereignty and moving away, in fact, from greater integration with the EU.
Thank you, William. Annika, your main message to political decision makers.
The other side of what William said is, of course, to work closely together, to invest both in soft security, hard security and cooperation, and I would say also in people-to-people contacts with Russia, as long as the space is not shrinking too much, because I believe we need to have that platform. Thank you.
Very good. Keira, your main message.
Well, while endorsing everything that the other speakers have said, let me choose something else. Ordinarily, when we come up against this question, we stress the importance of solidarity and ensuring that no one country or group can be targeted on their own. But we've talked about that a bit already. Let's choose something else. I would say transparency and honesty. And that's a message that is important for capitals way beyond this region. Being open and honest about what is happening behind the scenes with your own publics and your own politicians, while engaging with Russia wherever possible, wherever those conditional and fleeting opportunities to actually have a conversation emerge, still making sure that societies and publics, and especially elected leaders, are fully informed about the wide range of unpleasant activity that is coming from the challenges to stability and security in our region. Simply be open about it and do not brush it under the carpet so it can't be part of the conversation.
So would you say, Geir, that the transparency, what you were just emphasizing, that is like the most effective approach to ease these geopolitical tensions in the Baltic Sea region?
Yes, that's a very good point to the question. There is, of course, if you are operating in the field of traditional diplomacy, a downside to it. And that, of course, constrains a lot of our governments in being open about exactly what is going on. But at the same time, there is no way that a liberal democracy can properly defend itself against something about which the majority of its population is unaware, because they will not elect leaders who take a strong stance. They will not defend and protect and vote for policies that actually are designed to protect against these activities. So I think it is counterproductive to maintain this silence that we so often have about some of the activities that are going on.
Very good. What would you say, Annika? Because as we all know, and you have been raising it up as well, that there are certain tensions in the Baltic Sea area. More or less the same question to you, that what would be the most effective approach to ease these tensions?
Well, this is again a billion-dollar question, since the tension is obviously has the roots in the deterioration of the role that Russia plays over many years. And of course here diplomacy can play a role when it comes to finding platforms again. Even if the problems are very deep and long-standing, we must be naive enough, I believe, to try to use the platforms for dialogue with Russia. But I wanted to pick up on something that Geir said as well, and that is what a democratic leadership actually requires. It's a difficult situation, as we know that in many countries we have people that are re-elected that are not really transparent, not really caring for their people, but being more and more authoritarian. Some of them in the European Union, some of them in our neighborhood, and we have many copycats when it comes to authoritarian leadership. So I also see a challenge for democracy when it comes to what will people go for in the elections when the security situation from many angles seem very threatening, and there are risks related to that. And that kind of leadership of transparency and actually showing that it will take an effort and it will take long time to come back to a more prosperous situation. This is a true challenge as well to many democracies or half democracies in our vicinity.
Very good, Annika. William, do you agree? No.
Yes, there is the desire to have this dialogue. And I think that what I would emphasize is that we have a rare window of opportunity in the United States with President Biden. Over the last few decades, we've elected presidents with basically no foreign policy experience, and they have had to learn on the job. Some have done this better than others, but with President Biden, we have someone with over 3 decades of experience dealing with transatlantic issues, dealing with security issues, and dealing with Russia. I can't predict what comes after Joe Biden, and we hope that he has great success. But I think that in terms of answering these questions and trying to gauge a appropriate security response and promote security, we have in President Biden a unique example of someone with experience and someone who has a long commitment to the security of Europe and to the democratic values that were mentioned before.
Thank you, William, and thank you all. Keir Giles from UK, William E. POMERANZ from USA, and Annika Söder from Sweden. Thank you very much for your wise words. I have to say that I feel a little bit more secure now for our discussion. Thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. And we are actually going forward immediately without any more breaks and going to the second panel discussion what we are having this afternoon. Well, afternoon Finnish time, and the next title is Internal Security in the Baltic Sea Region. And I am pretty sure that we are going to talk a little bit more or less the same topics and the themes what we were discussing in the first panel session. We have three excellent panelists participating once again. And the first one is the ambassador, the British Embassy in Helsinki, Tom Todd. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon. Yes, hyvää päivää. Very nice to see you. And thank you, Jarno. Thank you for the invitation to speak. And obviously, it's difficult to follow such a distinguished panel beforehand, but my remarks will follow the same sort of geopolitical theme. So to start, I mean, I would see the Baltic Sea region very much historically as a geopolitically contested place between Russia and the West. And in fact, the brief period after the end of the Cold War, when it was less so, is abnormal, frankly, in the history of the Baltic. So I think we should remember that. What keeps the Baltic safe now? It's clearly hard power, fundamentally, and a greater NATO and allied security presence. Keir raised the question of the UK's exit from the European Union. That does not make any difference to our commitment to European security. We're very firmly committed to the Baltic through NATO and bilaterally, including with Finland and Sweden. And in fact, in recent years, the UK has significantly increased our military activity in this region. 2 years ago, we had the largest naval presence in the region since 1922, a period when we helped father the independence of Latvia and Estonia and helped protect Finland from Bolshevism. We have set up the Joint Expeditionary Force, the JEF, 10-nation force, which Iceland just recently joined. That is very active. And we have a presence in EFP in Estonia, and about 900 troops there working with our allies, which is a strong signal of our commitment. In the spring, the UK published its integrated review. This is the most significant and wide-ranging review of our foreign security policy for decades. And that set out how we saw Russia as our major pressing adversary. That doesn't mean that we're not open to collaboration with Russia, where Russia follows the rules of the game. So things like the Arctic, environmental policy, climate change, where Russia is part of the solution. But I think we've seen Russia demonstrate through its actions in the Crimea or back in 2014, and more recently in covert and not so covert operations on the continent of Europe, in my own country, that it is a threat, unfortunately, to our systems and our way of life. Now, the IR integrated review did talk about a tilt by the UK towards Asia Pacific, but actually it also doubled down very much on the Euro-Atlantic area. We are increasing our defence spending to 2.2% of GDP, and it confirmed our commitment to EFP and JEF, but it also confirmed a significant increase in the Royal Navy. And our security presence in this area is mainly through the Navy. It's about naval power, of course, in the Baltic Sea. And we're going to see the JEF evolve further. A big exercise is planned for this autumn into more of an operational force. So where does this all go? Short term, long term. I think short term, as Keir said, despite there being a state-of-the-art Russian tank division outside St. Petersburg, the tanks are not going to roll across the border. It's pretty unlikely, frankly, that happen in the near term. The states of the region are better prepared. We're seeing Sweden rearming. We're seeing Finland investing as well in defence with new maritime capability. The HX project, which of course the Eurofighter is the only pan-European plane, the right plane for Finland, as I would say, practiced in Baltic air policing. But I think the real challenge is around hybrid and cyber activity by Russia, actually, frankly. That is a real challenge. And the sort of sub-Article 5 operations. Now, in our IR, the UK placed a big emphasis on building up its cyber capability and its space capability. But this sort of grey zone area is a bit which I think our European and NATO allies have not got right and need to do more work on. And Finland, of course, has a major role in that, but there's a lot more to be done. And then finally, the three long-term challenges to Baltic security. From without, I think from Russia. I mean, the trajectory of Russia is well known. Russia is getting poorer. It's facing more troubles. It could rattle the cage a lot more than it is doing presently. So that is a problem for all of us in this part of the world. Secondly, I think there's a challenge from within Europe. We are facing some difficult decades ahead, I think. We're not out of COVID yet. We have decades of disruption, climate change, economic difficulties, potential clashes between the old and the young generation, all very open to hybrid influencing, I'm afraid, from adversaries. And also, as we face debt and increased social spending, can we maintain the increases we're putting into defence? A big question for the future. We need to do it, but it's going to be a challenge. And then finally, as a non-EU member state, I think there are some genuine questions about the way in which the EU evolves, which do pose challenges for Baltic security. Firstly, EU-Russia policy. EU-Russia policy, in our view, obviously needs to remain united and robust. There are some forces within the EU who would favour a policy of normalisation without condition. And I think that is a big challenge for the EU, and the EU needs to think very hard about that. This was recently debated at the European Council, but that question is open. The second challenge, EU challenge, I think, is around the way in which EU defence develops. It is quite interesting that the EU member states most in favour of independent, autonomous EU defence capability are the ones not facing an immediate Russian threat. The ones who do are less ambitious about that. And we saw recently a white paper, a non-paper, debated in the EU, which suggested a rapid reaction capability, which I think EU, a number of states in this part of the world, actually opposed because they are worried about that. So I think in the UK, we very much support EU defence, which supports and complements NATO. But if it actually ends up squandering the rare security capability we have in this part of the world and also alienates the Americans, then that is a problem for us in this part of the world. Ultimately, EU has an important security role, but it is NATO and the NATO command structure which protects the Baltic region. And we should avoid doing anything which threatens or undermines that capacity. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. And I really liked, especially when you mentioned cyber issues, and we will come back to those issues a little bit later. Thank you. Our next panelist is Kimmo KOHVAKKA, Director General for Rescue Services, Ministry of Interior, Finland. How are you doing, Kimmo?
Thank you very much, Jarmo. I'm very proud to be here in this distinguished comradeship of talking about the safety and security in Baltic Sea region. Feeling very fine.
Excellent. I think you are also happy for that reason that the Ministry of Interior published the second government report of internal security here in Finland last week, and I am pretty sure that you have been quite involved with that as well.
Absolutely. And just to go in my remarks straight away, as a background, I have to admit that the change in the internal security landscape is constant. Nothing stops but continues developing and changing. The same change is happening in all levels and all communities. What comes to citizens' experience of security and safety, I think it is essential in the change in security environments of today that we are proactive to seek for constructive solutions and look forward. As Jarmo already stated, we have a very fresh up-to-date government report on internal security, which estimates trends and security development in Finland in our international environment by 2030. The report assesses the state of internal security in Finland and the drivers of change affecting it, and it defines the internal security objectives and the direction of development for the current decade. This report aims to ensure the further development of internal security so that Finland will be perhaps an even safer country for all people and population groups in the future. The feeling of safety is an important part of internal security, and people's strong sense of safety and security also protects society from new types of security threats, including the most serious threat scenarios, even military conflict. Internal security authority, including rescue services or the authorities working on civil preparedness, should have sufficient resources to respond to all risk scenarios. In Finland, we have a long and strong tradition, what we call in Finnish, naapuriapu, helping our neighbor. Finland has always been sparsely populated nation scattered in the shores of thousands of lakes. Most of the authorities can be far away, and your closest help is the neighbor somewhere around the lake. To my mind, I see this model of a community help as a very functioning also when we talk in wider context of the Baltic Sea region. An open and democratic civil society is the basis for an active and encouraging environment for all its members. Activity grows when citizens genuinely see the possibilities to be engaged and heard in decision making. This is an essential implementation of the comprehensive security model and the principles of internal security, which are based on low thresholds between the authorities, civil society actors and business partners. Participation in decision-making processes on all levels in the society and in the Baltic Sea region cooperation builds trust on the positive impact in building the common future in the region. I see this as one essential form to grow mutual understanding and prevent possible risks which otherwise might lead to severe consequences in our region. Our common task, I think, is to build more safe and secure societies based on a strong civil society engagement, where we enable open dialogue and fruitful collaboration with the voluntary organization, for instance. This is our aim in the Finnish context, and I wish we can share this goal in the Baltic Sea region. This for starters, and now going into discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kimmo. Excellent points. We will next go, or are you in Ukraine at the moment, Valentin?
Yes, I am.
Warm welcome, Valentin Nalubachenko, Member of Parliament of Ukraine. How would you describe the general atmosphere or situation in Ukraine at the moment?
Hyvää päivää, hyvät naiset ja herrat. Ja sitten englanniksi. Then in English. Thank you so much. Actually, what I've heard from the previous panel discussion, actually in Ukraine is ongoing warfare, aggression against our country by Russian troops, by Russian special forces and their proxies. That's right. That's right. What is going on? And my interview, and actually what I would like to say now to you all, my dear colleagues, is to be more concentrated on what actually happened 7 years ago. We are in Ukraine understand what actually happened with this aggression of Russia. But let us all see and face the fact that we have faced more and more aggressive, hostile actions of Russian special services, of Russia itself, against all of us, against neighbor countries, against EU member states, against the United Kingdom, against Ukraine, and even what we see now in Belarus. That's the another question what I would like to raise is how do we respond to this increasing hostile activity? How we to respond to these increasing violations of international law, even common rules, which we all would like, of course, to prefer and to follow, but Russia itself, and again, Belarus now as well as an ally of Russia, they are not following. They are crossing those red lines. So my contribution and what I would like to underline, talking about Baltic state securities, how Ukraine could contribute to this security, to the Baltic state security. My idea is to be more close and stand together in 3 areas. First, defense. Multinational defense battalions of NATO. Good. Let's work on them. Let's train them here in Ukraine and Poland, even in Finland, if your government will be okay with that. Second issue, to stand together and to work, really work on cyber defense, on cyber security, by creating those common task forces, by allowing share data. I think Ukraine can share unique data with the Baltic state securities, especially, and interior ministries on GRU, FSB, and other agents, and especially those who are or were involved in subversive, in illegal trafficking, in terrorist attacks, and so far so on. I think we should do this, should allow those agencies to be more effective by getting more data, by being more equipped to face any threat, to be capable to prevent even what's happening or happened before in the United Kingdom and Poland, even in Germany, and still constantly happening in Ukraine. And the third area, counterintelligence, the same approach. My contribution idea is to help, by all means, our counterintelligence agencies, SUPA, SEPO, SBU in Ukraine, MI5, 6, whatever, in the United Kingdom, in other countries, along the Russian western border, to be again more effective, to stand together, to work together, to be capable to respond on more comprehensive level, upgraded level. And the last but not least issue, sanctions. Economic sanctions as the most effective tool to at least not let Russians be so hostile outside Russia, in European Union member states, in other countries, where we should by all means cut off all illegal money laundering issues, by all corrupt schemes, not to let them, I mean special services of Russia and their agents in European countries, to get money and to spend them for sponsoring terrorism, separatism, or any other dangerous thing or issue towards national security of European countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentin, and thank you all, gentlemen, for very good opening words. Hey, we will go forward, and actually the first topic that I would like to discuss with you is about cyber issues, because as we all understand that when we usually talk about security, we are talking about security in the physical world, And that's what we have done almost more or less all the time when we humans have been on this earth. But now we have this new world, digital world, cyber domain, which is actually going to be more and more important when we are talking about security. And in that sense, the national borders don't play in the same way, the same role anymore as in the physical world. What is your opinion or your views concerning about the cybersecurity and the role of the cyber threats and cybersecurity in the Baltic Sea region? Would you like to, Tom, to start?
Yes, thank you. Well, that's a very important topic. Obviously, with the digitization of society, which has been expedited by COVID, actually, that is a great thing, but actually puts up more risk, frankly, from cyber attack. And less from authoritarian states and from criminal gangs. And I think there's an impetus on governments to improve their own cyber defences and also to encourage and incentivise business and frankly individuals to do the same. And that's a really important thing. But I also think there is a big thing around holding malign actors to account for their actions. And I think collectively across Europe, there's a lot more that needs to be done for that. The nature of attribution is that it is often legally impossible to prove 100% that a state is behind an attack which has disabled your electricity supply or your power station or whatever, or your TV station. You can't do that. You can say with 90% accuracy, and I think states in Europe need to work much better in actually holding up countries that are trying to undermine our critical and national infrastructure in this way, be much tougher, and that's starting to happen. We saw that in Finland with China being held to account for the attack on the Finnish parliament recently, but there are other instances where perhaps a lot more could be done in that regard.
Very good. Kimmo.
Thank you very much, Jarmo. As I'm sure that everyone on this conference knows, that we in Finnish society here, we are more or less students of certain Professor Jarmo Limnell in this area. So basically, I'd say that I take this point of view that cyber threats and the cyber world and the physical world, as Jarmo has many times underlined, is something that is no longer, we are not able to, let's say, separate that thing when it comes to functional society, when it comes to citizens' lives and so forth. That means that the cybersecurity and safety has to be a quality within all of our thinking and way of life, and also what we are doing and so forth. The answer is quite simple, that it's self-evident that we have to also, when we want to concentrate on safety and security issues, we have to take that a valid or let's say that built-in cybersecurity point of view in everything that we are doing. There is no, to my mind, safety and security now includes automatically the cybersecurity point of view, and perhaps one underlining once again the citizens, the actors when it comes to inner safety, inner security. And today's world, when the cyber threats or disinform or mal intentions when it comes to let's say trying to make more insecure messages, they are coming not only inside naturally, but we are in a global network in that way. So the readiness and the capabilities, the awareness of the citizens is very key feature also here, both in naturally and in the Baltic Sea region. That is my point of view in this point. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Kimmo. What about you, Valentin? Because we all know that Ukraine has experienced the malicious side of the digitalization as well in the previous years. what's the role of cybersecurity in your internal security at the moment?
The role is crucial, and I agree with the professionals here at our panel that we should constantly upgrade our capabilities to protect our citizens, our cyber spaces, national cyber spaces, from disinformation attacks, from panic or whatever other hostile activity in cyberspace. How to do this? My idea is the same, to be more close and to cooperate, to begin close cooperation between our IT companies and on governmental level. Governmental level, I mean to test on national level and internationally our IT systems, our cyber, let's say, spaces, to test are we all at the same level and capable to protect from the attacks of FSB or whatever other special forces or special agency of Russia against our citizens or against our critical infrastructure. That's the first point, to test our systems. The second point is, of course, to allow on a daily basis data sharing among our governments, maybe at ministers of interior level. I mean, whatever attack happen or happening in any country, it should be immediately known to all other members or states or governments, and at the same time to share the special information. I mean, those IT addresses, other companies being used by FSB or GRU against us, and some other technical information which will immediately help to protect other countries if any of such attack we are defining and experiencing from Russian special services. And the third point, of course, even common cyber defense task forces, that's of course the most effective solution up to date on my mind.
Thank you very much, Valentin. We have a question from the audience, and I will ask this actually to all of you. So the question is, does any of the speakers think that soon Russia will swallow Belarus for good? And if so, what would that mean for the Baltic states' security and for NATO? Easy question. Who wants to start?
Belarus is our neighbor state. I can start.
Yes,
so
please.
Let gentlemen to get some time to be prepared. Let me say, from the point of view of Russian special services, what they've done to prepare the swallowing of Belarus. First, they have organized, in brackets of course, assassination attempt, in brackets again, against Lukashenko, the leader of Belarus. Then they've set up this hijacking of Ryan airplane with the arrest of a young opposition IT guy, Protasevich. So these are two steps, even psychologically, around Lukashenko. From my point of view, how they in luring or entrapping him into this union state, which means directly swallowing of Belarus, and to restore USSR, which is still the main and the craziest national idea of Putin and his government and his regime in Russia.
Good. Kimmo, do you want to comment?
Yeah,
well, just
well, you go. Kimmo first, I'll follow.
okay. There are more experience when it comes to field of, let's say, foreign policy and diplomacy. But of course, just to say shortly that Finland is also the authorities within internal security are very closely, let's say, following this situation ongoing on the Belarus and Russia. That's naturally something that will affect on in a safety and security situation when it comes to Northern Europe and so forth. So just saying at this point that of course we are closely monitoring the situation, and of course it will have a big impact how things are going on in onwards. But perhaps this only at this point. Thank you.
What about Tom?
Yeah, well, just to add, obviously, we are obviously very concerned about the situation in Belarus and monitoring it very closely. We recently, like the rest of Europe, barred our planes from going to Belarus and vice versa, and brought in sanctions against Lukashenko and his cronies and so on. Yeah, I mean, as people will know, it's long been suggested that one of Putin's objectives has been to reabsorb, that he would see it, Belarus into the Russian state. There are all sorts of potential constitutional ways of doing that. There's also been rumours that the Russians have been after a military base, frankly, in Belarus, particularly to have a greater ability to project power into the region. And clearly that, not just power, but also for things like air defence, overlook, and so on and so forth. So clearly, if that were to happen, that would be a significant development. At the same time, obviously, we haven't talked about Kaliningrad, which exists already. So already there is, in a sense, a forward base of Russian military capability in the Baltic up front, so to speak. So clearly that will be an escalation, and I think both NATO and Europe would need to think about what they did about such a move. But I think it's actually, again, speaking more personally, I think it's quite interesting that this has actually not happened, yet. And I think I'm not a great student of Belarusian politics, but I can imagine that there is actually a Belarusian national identity. And the concept of having Russian troops on your soil in Belarus, inviting the Russians in, so to speak, I can't imagine that will be very popular amongst many people in Belarus, actually. So maybe that's something which is constraining the room for manoeuvre of President Lukashenko. But I'll stop there.
Thank you. KIMMO.
Thank you very much. Just not going to, let's say, and wanted to state one point which comes to Russia, very practical in today's Baltic Sea region and Northern Europe, European and the global threat scenario. The climate change is something that is, let's say, that will be in forthcoming decades something that will affect most certainly also in you could say safety and security geopolitics. And in that point of view, Russia is a very, very important practical partner when it comes to climate change, when it comes to forest fire, Arctic area safety and security. And in that point of view, we also need to have a good practical, let's say, dialogue and a possibility. For instance, if we should have a major forest fire in a nearby, let's say, Finnish borders or something like that, that will be a joint effort when it comes to, let's say, trying to prevent massive fire destruction for the nature or release of particles in the atmosphere and so forth and so forth. So mainly in a future decades, we will face global threats in that kind of area. And actually the thing is that cooperation is not enough. We need to operate together. That's an essential part also when it comes to adjusting the climate change, but we have to be very coherent and strong when fighting the consequences also when it comes to, let's say, climate change efforts. Thank you very much.
So we are looking for here a little bit like a certain kind of balance. On the other hand, like you said, Kimmo, very well, and it was said in the previous panel as well, the importance of transparency, importance of cooperation and dialogue. But then on the other hand, like it was mentioned in this panel, that yes, you have to be able to do the certain kind of response as well when there is a time for that. What would you say, especially from the Ukraine point of view, Valentin? You have tried this both points.
Actually, from our point of view, as Ukraine, we are still suffering from Russian aggression, and for us, the picture is quite clear who is the enemy and what to do here in Ukraine. That's why our NATO aspirations are clear. That's why we are standing for effective international cooperation, especially in defense and security area, understanding that we could and should contribute to Baltic state securities and European security even wider, considering the situation. Contribute by our experience, by our data, by our capabilities, by our even NATO and EU aspirations. So that's how we see the perspective, actually the developing of the situation. And at the same time, we understand quite clear that without precise economic sanctions against Russian aggression, against Russian regime, and talking about Belarus against Lukashenko and his regime, will not prevail, will not be successful. Same time, I agree with His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. We should keep the difference. Sanctions against the regime and the democratic policies and transparency towards people, towards citizens, both Belarus and Russia. The people are not our enemies. On the contrary, we should keep this openness and friendship towards them, distinguishing from what their leaders or special services or even governments are doing and how they are acting at this time.
Good. Any thoughts, Tom, on the same topic?
Well, just to pick up on KIMMO's point actually around climate change, actually, I mean that is a security threat actually, quite clearly. I mean it's a security threat actually. I think, I mean coming back to the Belarus and the Baltic, because a lot of Russian military infrastructure in the sort of Siberian Arctic region is going to be affected by climate change very seriously. I mean, you know, your airfields are going to crack and your bases are going to fall down, and this is a big problem actually, I think, for them. But just back on climate change again, I mean, this is an area where actually there is pretty good collaboration between Europe and Russia. I mean, at the moment, I could say at the moment, British, Nordic and Russian scientists are collaborating on climate change. We are collectively monitoring, you know, through data collection, how the climate is warming in Siberia and the Arctic. That is a really good and active, positive area of collaboration, and quite rightly so, because it's in our mutual interest, and climate change is an existential threat to all of us. So let's work on that together. And you can do that, you know, with China and other, with Russia and China and other regimes, even if you disagree with other parts of their policy, and stand up to them.
Very good. Hey, gentlemen, actually my next question is to all of you. I was thinking about that, okay, we have discussed about the different threats and risks and a little bit about these not so nice things, but when we are thinking about actions and solutions, especially in the terms of internal security, what kind of action should be taken to maintain stability and prevent new risks in the Baltic Sea region? What would you say? And if we start with you, Valentin.
Thank you. Precisely three areas, as I mentioned, I think are crucial and the most important. First is defense. Common defense where it's possible, multinational battalions within NATO, with NATO, when it's possible, and not to talk, not to wait, just act here and now. That's, I think, is the most important in defense area, including defense in our seas, Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Azov Sea, to keep them in mind as well. The second area is cyber defense, cyber security. And again, not to wait, not to hesitate, but to act. data sharing, common task forces, exchanging, sharing of data, and other possible tools and methods to be taken as soon as possible. And the third area, counterintelligence, and those agencies in our countries responsible for national and security for our people, to let them work closely on everyday basis, 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Valentin. Tom.
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, I think the most important thing that all our governments in Europe need to look at actually is our crisis management structures. I think the coronavirus crisis has shown that our non-hard crisis structures need to be looked at again. I think a lot of our governments have, and I used to be involved personally in crisis management in London, have sort of off-the-shelf approaches to all sorts of soft crises. I think you need to look at that very hard and increase our capability to respond agilely, generically to a whole suite of crises, even the ones we have not yet thought of. That's very important. And as part of that, I think we also, as democracies, need to look at the legal bases for doing so. That has also, I think, been shown up in this current pandemic. I know, again, having been involved in this before, in our countries, it takes 2 to 3 years to get a law through our parliament and operational. You know, dictators and authoritarian regimes can do things tomorrow that we can't do legally or not able to do or politically able to do. So we really need to revisit that. And those lessons from coronavirus will apply across a whole series of potential scenarios which might apply in future in the Baltic region. Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you very much, Tom. I really like that one and I agree. Kimmo.
Thank you very much. I must say I'm very strongly supporting the point of view of the Mr. Ambassador. One thing at this very moment is to take the lessons learned when it comes to COVID-19, both nationally and in a European level and globally. The silver lining of this pandemic is we can now see through our, let's say, national safety and security, all of society approach of how do we do comprehensive security work. At least in Finland, we have found lots of things to improve, and sharing those, let's say, points jointly within the region and the Nordic and the European community, for instance, is one important thing to do. Also in internal risk wisely. Very dull to say, but and nothing interesting in that. The cooperation and deepening cooperation in that sense, as I already mentioned, not only to cooperate but organize a together the operation. That is something that's within the cooperation you have a possibility to choose to do that, let's say, joint work, but working together is a stronger feeling of doing things together, both in EU level, Nordic level, Baltic Sea level. And the third point, citizens are safety and security actors, and how to support them to make their lives more safe and secure. That will benefit for both the different societies, the nation as a whole, and for instance in a Baltic Sea region and the European Union. Thank you.
Excellent points, Kimmo. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, my last question to you all. Actually, it is the same question that I asked in the previous panel to those panelists. Our title has been Internal Security in the Baltic Sea Region. What would be your key message to political decision makers in this context? Tom.
Well, political decision makers. Yeah, I think Keir said that the Baltic region was actually doing pretty well compared to other parts of the world in terms of its security management, and that is clearly the case. But the thing I'd always advise my ministers in the UK is, don't be complacent about anything, what you see may not transpire to be the case tomorrow. And the other thing I always say to ministers in the UK is, when you have a crisis, you deal with it with what you have now. You can't build capability in 6 months or 2 years. You need it now. So you have to don't complacent and think about what you need to deal with the unexpected would be my message.
Very good. Kimmo, your main message.
Well, in Finland, the cooperation in the Baltic Sea region has a very strong political support. To my mind, it's simply to say keep on the good work, but of course also keep on in mind that cooperation needs resources also, that different kind of authorities have the background, the nations have the background to do this cooperation. Thank you.
Very good, Kimmo. Valentin.
Stand together, stand united, keep up with a good job, and no hesitation, no place for hesitation. Act here and now, and precisely to do our common job to protect our common security.
I think we can all agree with that. So thank you very much, Tom, Kimmo, Valentin. And actually, we are going to have the closing remarks by one political decision maker, member of European Parliament, Ville Niinistö. Did you, Ville, hear those messages to you, and what do you think?
Yes, I did. I've been actually listening to the whole discussion during these 2 hours, with having other meetings here at remote simultaneously. So this distance working does allow you to do things simultaneously. So I think it was a very interesting discussion. Please, closing remarks by you. Yes, thank you, Jarno. And greetings to everybody. Obviously, I'm looking at this discussion, what we've had in the last few hours, and the topic of geopolitics, Baltic Sea region, and the security aspects of it from 2 angles. I'm also a board member of the Centrum Balticum Foundation and an MEP from Turku, so I'm looking at this from the angle of southwestern Finland, how the world looks from there, and then as an MEP member of European Parliament from the viewpoint of Brussels and EU decision making. And I think where the first panel ended is actually a very good point to reiterate here in my closing remarks. It's obvious that we as democracies around the Baltic Sea region, we've had a history of rather stable relations, increasing cooperation, increasing economic cooperation, and membership of EU has been spread across the Baltic Sea region now that all countries bordering Baltic Sea are members of the EU. If you take into account that all the other bordering countries except for Russia, obviously. And this gives a context for the Baltic Sea region where EU cooperation is important. And I think the kind of like the understanding of that in a democracy, transparent, open discussion about the geopolitical challenges we have and our region has is already a goal in itself, because it increases our public's awareness of possible problems and risks in the future. Also risks related to the cooperation we have with Russia, the situation, what is happening in the Ukraine, the history of what happened in 2014, and how we can avoid similar development of military aggression in the neighborhood around us and in regions nearby us. And I think these lessons have to be taken into account when we go forward. So we have to be open about the problems we have, and we have to be open about the problems that we currently have with Russia and Belarus and the sanction policies that we have to place in order to uphold international law and to make sure that Ukraine does get its sovereignty upheld in hopefully an outcome of that comes from the Minsk process, and we go forward with solving the core problem between the deteriorating relations between Russia and the EU. But as I said, being open about these problems is a step towards a more secure Baltic Sea region already, because that includes automatically understanding of how our policies can also solve the problem in different fields. And I would like to emphasize maybe what we heard in the last panel was about cooperation, doing different kind of exercises together, increasing our understanding of each other, increasing cooperation when it comes to safety issues and resilience against pandemics. And the discussion we have in the European Union about strategic autonomy does have a very close resemblance to this discussion. That our cooperation, one of its aims is to increase the sovereignty of each member states of the European Union. And therefore, I think we should not underestimate our soft power when we speak about how we can form our own future, because soft power in the current world does have also strengths when it comes to limiting geopolitical challenges. We heard in the last discussion and also in the previous discussion that climate change does have a geopolitical security aspect, and that is very obvious. The Arctic is changing fast. There is a rapid competition about use of natural resources there, but also security aspects related to how we can make sure that the Arctic area remains safe and the environmental challenges do not deteriorate the economic basis of our societies. Also, when it comes to fossil fuels, we know that we are dependent currently on gas imports and even coal imports from countries like Russia. So if we look at the answer to climate change and limiting our geopolitical exposure in fossil fuels dependency from external energy sources, the solution is the same in both. EU is actually putting a lot of money now, and the member states are putting a lot of money into building our capacities in renewables. Renewables and windmills are, for example, already the cheapest form of new energy in Finland and in a number of countries in the region as well. We are building better energy grids, that is, electricity systems are more and more aligned, and the Baltic states will join the Central European Grid Coordination System by the end of 2026. They will have a better security when it comes to not being dependent on the synchronization of the grid from Russia as they've had from the past. So putting emphasis on solving the climate crisis, increasing renewables, investing in renewable-based hydrogen and these kind of solutions will limit our exposure to dependency on fossil fuels, but also solve climate crisis. So there is a lot to be gained in soft power cooperation between the EU countries. And obviously, we do have countries outside EU that are also important in this context. So it was very important that in the panels we heard also views from the US and Great Britain regarding cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, because obviously as members of NATO, we want them to be involved also in the development of this region. So all in all, I would say that this discussion has itself promoted the goal for having a safe and secure future-oriented cooperation in the Baltic Sea region, because taking up these geopolitical challenges that are rising once again in the world is already one step into solving them. Thanks a lot for this discussion, and I hope all of you have enjoyed it as much as I did.
Kiitos paljon ja hyvää päivän jatkoa. Kiitoksia.